The latest leaks keep pointing to the fact that after episode 7, we will once again hear about Kaufmo, and what's even more exciting is that we will finally get the story of Ribbit.
Hi everyone, as you probably noticed at the beginning of the video there was an AI voice, and now I will quickly explain everything. It was really important and interesting for me to try voicing my videos with my own voice, and I'm super grateful for all your support. However, I started to notice more and more that a lot of people genuinely struggle with my pronunciation. For many, it's really hard to watch the video, listen to my voice, and read the subtitles at the same time, so I decided to temporarily bring AI voice back to this channel so that all viewers can equally enjoy watching. Over the next months, I will do everything I can to improve my skill and fully bring my own voiceover to the channel, but for now, enjoy the video.
In episode 5, we first got introduced to the existence of Ribbit, and in episode 6, we saw a scene that referred not only to this little frog, but also to Kaufmo, and now we finally have at least some official teaser for episode 7, which further confirmed the fact that these two characters will become an integral part of the new episode. If we look back at the chronology of episode 6, the first red flag was that very scene, then the dialogue with Pomni, and all of this eventually led to Jax having a panic attack. In the new teaser, Goose showed that this story wasn't over, and Jax's worsening state will only keep progressing. In the background, we noticed Kinger, who we know as the Master of Conversations, and it becomes pretty clear that in episode 7 we'll see a new dose of therapy, and this time the main participants will be Kinger and Jax. It's important to remember that after every talk with Kinger, the characters really did feel better, and I'm sure Jax won't be an exception. It's exactly during this very conversation that we'll be shown a huge number of memories, most of which will be directly connected to Kaufmo and Ribbit. We'll finally learn how Jax is tied to their abstraction, and while today we'll still talk about how Jax affected Ribbit and his fate, the way Jax is connected to Kaufmo still remains a huge mystery, one that we'll get answers to in the next episode. Now let's dive into one of the most important and intriguing topics of episode 7, Jax and Ribbit. Now if we look at his reaction to Ribbit's room, what immediately stands out is the complete despair and confusion on Jax's face. As we remember from the pilot episode, the hallway is full of rooms belonging to characters who haven't lived in the digital circus tent for a long time, and we never saw that kind of reaction from Jax to them. Sure, you could say maybe he just didn't notice them, but first off, they're literally all over the hallway, and second, the creators of the show put the spotlight specifically on those two. As a result, I can draw a certain conclusion. Jax's different reactions reflect his mental state, and especially considering that Ribbit and Kaufmo's abstractions happened one after the other, we can draw a parallel that the digital circus system, with every new loss, stirs up more and more emotions in Jax, and, as a result, worsens his condition. First, it's confusion about why it's happening, then anger at everything going on, and after that, there's only madness left, leading straight to his transformation into an abstracted monster. Our problem is that most of the time we see Jax after all the events have already happened, but there was a short period when Jax didn't yet know about Kaufmo's so-called death and was still that same fun guy he always describes himself as.
As time goes on, we just end up falling into our archetypes, become part of the machine.
What's your archetype then? The villain?
Listen, I add a key dynamic. I see how far I can push things. I screw with people, and I break the fourth wall. You wanna know why? It's 'cause it's funny. I do everything 'cause it's funny. 'Cause I'm the funny one. We all just became archetypes. I at least have the self-awareness to choose who I am.
In that case, we realize that Jax was already like this even before Pomni showed up, and I'm sure his so-called archetype fully formed right after the terrible events that happened with Ribbit, and all of this is directly tied to what we see in one of the final scenes of episode 6. And now that we understand the connection between Jax's mental state and his outlook on life in the digital circus, with the deaths of characters who were close to him, we can move on to the next part of the video where you'll find out what happened to Ribbit, why Jax is directly guilty of it, and how it's going to affect him in the upcoming episodes. First off, it's important to point out that Jax was already in the digital circus before Ribbit showed up, and most likely had witnessed other characters being abstracted. Because of that, he developed his defense mechanism that we see in literally every episode. What Ribbit was like back then, we don't know, but judging by Pomni, we can assume he was a pretty good character, and that's where things get really interesting. Let's start by remembering that short dialogue scene between Ragatha and Jax.
Howdy, howdy.
I know exactly what you're doing with Pomni, and it'll never work.
Huh?
You know, getting close with Pomni to corrupt her. Wait, no, wait! Oh, wow, I didn't actually think that'd work.
Before we go back to that scene, I want to remind you that Jax's final worldview, so to speak, was shaped after Ribbit's abstraction, though it was already similar even before he showed up. In this scene, Regatha makes it very clear that she knows what's going to happen to Pomni if she keeps hanging around Jax. And that's the first thing we should pay attention to, because right after those words we saw pure animal rage from Jax. I already told you this is insanely weird, and the only other time we saw that exact expression on his face was in that very scene from episode 5 where Regatha mentioned Ribbit. So we understand that Jax fully realized why Regatha said that, and if we see emotions like that, it means this guy definitely has something to hide, and he's fully aware that in his best friend's death, there's absolutely some guilt on his part. I assume Ribbit was originally a kind character, and at the moment when he was, so to speak, a newbie in the digital circus, it's pretty likely that Jax had similar talks with him to the one we saw in the dorm hallway.
You know none of this is real, right?
Oh, what do you mean? Like the circus?
The game today is literally to shoot each other, so what's the point in taking this moral high ground?
Well, they're my friends. I don't really want to hurt them.
All right, let me be real here. Why do you care about that?
Now let's remember what Jax said about archetypes, and it's pretty likely that after talking with him, Ribbit came up with a role for himself and played it. But the whole problem is that character behavior isn't really about archetypes, it's more about their conscious behavior that was carried over from the real world, and based on that, their characters were created. The clearest example is Gangle, who most likely suffered from bipolar disorder, and that's exactly why she has multiple masks that change her mood. If we look at the fun-loving Jax, who's playing the role of the cheerful guy, because if we remember that very scene, it becomes obvious that Jax is pretending most of the time, and right here we see the consequences of those actions.
God, you look stupid.
What if after all those talks with Jax, Ribbit also started wearing a mask that went against his true self and over time began to notice that it was slowly destroying him, eventually leading to irreversible consequences? It's pretty likely that the same thing happened with Kaufmo, because from Regatha's words we know Kaufmo was a fun guy, so why did he just straight up lose it? Maybe that's exactly why Jax is so scared of making friends with anyone. He fully understands that he's the reason characters get abstracted, and feeling that guilt, he slowly starts losing it himself. So, one of the most dramatic and, at first glance, disgusting scenes in the entire history of the digital circus is actually the real saving of one character's life. As always, I'm waiting for your thoughts in the comments, and see you soon in the next videos.